guys, Ken here, your Thrifty Apprentice, and welcome back to another Thrifty review. Today we have a quick review and we are going to be looking at Paul Rubens 24 count of candy color watercolors. Okay, so we have got a lot to talk about and a lot to cover, so let's just jump right in. Let's start off with saying I was gifted with this set. It was sent by a viewer from a seller on AliExpress. Side note, sites like AliExpress and Etsy, you'll have a lot of sellers who will buy a watercolor set in the tubes, and then they'll take those tubes and pan the sets up into travel sets or into smaller sets and then resell them. So sometimes it's really hard to know that if the listing from an AliExpress seller is actually a genuine product, or even Etsy for that matter, because sellers on that site tend to do the same thing. So keep that in mind, that information to click a little later on as we continue to talk. Okay, so now let's talk about the set itself. Paul Rubens Candy Color. When I originally figured out what this set was, because it was sent to me in just a box. In the box came the swatch card, the paints, and there was a water brush, which didn't come with the set. It was just sent as another individual gift. There was no name, no information about the paints, absolutely nothing. Just the tin and the swatch sheet. So the only information I originally had to go on about the paints was the color number for each one of them. So naturally, I had to go start investigate to figure out exactly what the product was that I was using. So first things first, I decided that I would go ahead and swatch the paints that were in the tin out on the color card or the swatch sheet that came in the box with the tin, just so I could get a general idea of what these colors were. Now, it was obvious from initially looking at them that they were sort of a pastel macaron collection of paints. So I put that information just like that into the Google search engine, 24 pastel watercolors in tubes, because I knew they had to have been poured from tubes, and they were just poured into this little travel palette, which has 24 molded quarter pans. Now, a quarter pan, as you know, is half the size of a half pan. So that's basically how the sellers do it. They tube it into these smaller pans, and then they sell the individual sets of the original paint. So after Googling and going through a couple of pages, I actually ran across a picture of the exact palette that I had. So clicked on it, lo and behold, it takes me to AliExpress, which I knew that's where the paints had come from. And that is where the information journey started on finding out what these paints were. So it turns out they are, as I said, Paul Rubens candy colored watercolors. Now, the next thing I did was went to Amazon, Dick Blick, Jerry Autorama, just to see if I could find these paints in the tube set from the original tube set, that is, just to confirm that they were genuine. Could not find anything on them. Google candy colored watercolors. The only thing that kept coming up was either this set on AliExpress, the same set in different tins on Etsy, a couple of reviews about the sets from AliExpress, but I was never able to find any type of picture of the actual Paul Rubens set that all of these different smaller sets were supposedly made of. Okay, so I eventually ran across a blog by Shevii, that's SHESVII, Shevii.com, and it was an entire review, as well as information on how the blogger was able to source all of the information that we're going to get into. I know, it's a lot. I'm sorry, guys. So you can purchase this set on AliExpress in either the yellow tin, a pink tin, a purple tin, or a blue tin. As I told you earlier, it comes in 24 quarter pans, which are like 1 milliliter a piece. So it's not a lot of paint, but it's enough paint to get a really good general idea of the quality of the paints. And it's actually enough paints to last, quite a long time, especially due to the fact that they are pastel colors, not something that myself personally will be using on a regular basis. And I would assume that most general artists don't really use these type of colors on a regular basis, so they should stretch out for quite some time. All right, so the set has 20 pastel colors and 4 Daniel Smith dupes. So on the blog that I found, I was able to figure out the color names, the pigment numbers, yes, the color names and the pigment numbers. So the blogger was able to find a Paul Rubens website where they researched or compared the numbers for each of the colors that came in the Candy Color set against a Paul Rubens chart to find both the color name, as well as the pigment information. And the last 4 in this set are the 4 that are Daniel Smith dupes. So let's take a look at the swatch sheet. And now you see why I couldn't do like the standard type of reviews that I've started to do on this particular set. It is a lot. So let's take a look at the swatch sheets. And I do actually even have like a notepad with things written down just off camera, so I don't forget anything that I wanted to talk about with these paints. So I swatched the paints out here. I forgot that wasn't in the binder like that. So I swatched the paints out on just a normal piece of cellulose watercolor paper. This is actually student grade paper. So I swatched them out in a really watery wash for the first layer, and then of course, as always, I did a second glaze layer for opacity testing. Put down the black line so that we'd be able to see if there were any fillers, exactly what colors were opaque, semi-transparent, or transparent. I was sure to write down the stock number for each color, as well as the color name given and the pigment numbers that I was able to source from the information on the blog that I found about the AliExpress set. Now, Etsy had information on the set as well, and I will say there was a little difference in the information because on Etsy, the sets had certain colors, and then there were certain colors that were different. The names for the colors on Etsy were a little different from the names for the colors on the blog that I found. So here was my rationality behind the situation. The Candy Color paints has to be a set, if this is truly Paul Rubens, that is centered and targeted only in the Asian market. It would be my assumption that it is not sold outside of the Asian market. Therefore, that kind of explains why the areas of AliExpress and Etsy that you can source the paints through come from sellers that are in Asian markets, right? So to me, those 2 dots connected to kind of explain why I was not able to find the paints on an American or European website. With that being said, I pressed on and decided that I was going to do a color mixing and a preliminary test painting with the paints, which I just did a daisy. And I learned a lot. So let's back up for a minute. None of the colors, and I do mean none of the colors, are single pigment colors, with the exception of the Naples Yellow Light, which is a PY53. Every other color is a mixture of 2 or 3 pigments. Every single color contains PW6 in the mixture, which is a white, which is added to stretch the pigment. It gives it a little bit more of an opacity, and it also explains why some of the colors have an almost white appeal when you look at them. As you can see, for the opacity test, each one of these colors will leave residue on the black marker line because they are opaque. They're going to stand up really, really well on like black watercolor paper. But the lighter colors will have sort of, not necessarily a chalky look, but you can tell that they have white in them. Now, this particular paper, as I was telling you earlier, is a really cheap, cellulose, I can't talk, student grade paper, 140-pound cold press. And it's not the best paper in the world, therefore I don't think the colors showed to their true potential on this paper, but it did give me a general idea what I may or may not be able to do with them. There was not a huge shift in the paints from wet to dry. They hold their opacity, definitely. They hold their depth and their color saturation. Now, these last four here, as I was explaining earlier, were dupes of Daniel Smith paints, according to the information I was able to source, which is why none of those have any PW6 in it. Those are all, they're all double and triple pigment colors, but there is no white added because based on the information, these four were formulated to directly emulate colors from the Daniel Smith line. So a lot of the colors granulated. All four of the Daniel Smith dupes granulate. Any of the colors that had the PB29 pigment, which is normally what we know for ultramarine blue, all of those have a granulation to them. Any of the ones that contain PB28, which if I'm not mistaken, cobalt, which tend to granulate on a normal basis, have a granulation to them. Yeah, other than that, a lot of them are flat, but a lot of the colors contain PB29. So again, you're gonna get a granulation. Love the four Daniel Smith dupes. If I could pull those out and put them in a palette of other colors that I use on a normal basis, I really, really would. Love those colors. So here I did a color mixing, which in all honesty, I was kind of nervous doing because I wasn't sure how to pull any quote unquote primaries because this is a pastel set. So I did the best from what I know. I used the PY53, which is the Naples yellow. I used the mixture of PV19 and PW6, which is the gray purple powder. And I also used the PB15 PW6 mixture, which they refer to as green lime. And I was able to get other colors that did not come in the set. It gave me a decent orange, a decent green, another decent violet purple here. Not huge issues with the mixing, considering the fact that they all had white. So the more pigments you're mixing together with the white added from all of those colors, the more opaque and the more chalky. So although they may not be chalky in like the first watery layer, maybe not even with the glaze layer, the more pigments, excuse me, or the more of these you try to mix together to form a color, the more chalky, in my opinion, that is going to get. So let's see, am I forgetting anything? The paints had a lot of pros, in my opinion. They had a lot of pros. So they have a really creamy consistency in the pan. They re-wet really well. Seriously, and after you wet them, you just can tap them with the brush and you get plenty of pigment. They have an amazing flow. I don't think I've had any other paints that I've tested up until this point that have the flow that these do. So they are beautiful pastel colors. Like I told you earlier, there are a lot of colors that have granulation to them. The phthalos will stain, as you do expect anything with a phthalo pigment in it to do. And because of the PW6 that's added to each of the colors, they really reminded me more of a gouache, because they're not transparent at all. They really reminded me more of a gouache than, say, a watercolor. And that's typically what you use Chinese white for in a watercolor set. You add it to the other colors in order to give those colors a more opaque look or a more gouache feel. So I would say that these paints probably are more related to a gouache than they are to an actual watercolor. But again, that's just my opinion, based on my use and based on the research that I finally got around to digging through everything and discovering. The question was still left, are these a professional paint? Are these real? Are they actually by Paul Rubens? Now, what I will say is that the paints performed with a really professional quality. So the first thing I did was a little test demo, which was a white daisy. Nothing really spectacular. The paints flowed really well. They mixed really well on the paper, although all of them have a PW6 in it, which really kind of blew my mind. The granulation, as you can see, is really pretty. And again, this is a really cheap cellulose paper, and you were still able to see. Now, the thing that I do like about this paper is that it is sort of toothy, so the texture lends well to granulating paints. Outside of that, I really should have swatched the paints on, say, a 100% cotton watercolor paper, just because of the doubts that I had about them being truly professional from the get-go. So let's take a look at some of the paintings that I did. So you see the daisy. Later on, for a little quick sketch in order to get my day started, I did this leaf. Just did a really, different purple background in it. This turned out to be mixed media because this is the paints coupled with, I want to say, Marco Refine, because those are the color pencils that I have handy most time. Marco Refine colored pencils for some accent. I think it turned out well. I will say that initially I was really kind of nervous, and I had my doubts about these paints. Just the question of their profession, them being professional, just the question of whether somebody would have been taking advantage of consumers and customers via AliExpress by selling something that they were proclaiming was a Paul Rubens product, and it actually wasn't. But the more I used the paints, the more I was able to experience the quality of the paints. The more it was believable to me that these are an real Paul Rubens product that may not be available in the American market. Therefore, you're having to order it from sites like AliExpress or Etsy, where you get independent sellers who are in the Asian market, who kind of, minimize the packaging and minimize the sets down to smaller sets and sell them for a profit, sort of like drop shipping almost. So that's what I got from all of that. Love the way it performed here. Really enjoyed this. It got me really, really curious, because this is the same paper, if I'm not mistaken. Wait, let me make sure. No. So this is a quarter piece of B Company Aqua B paper. This is their student grade paper. This swatch was done on, what is the name? Aspire Color Premium Watercolor paper, which it's okay. It's okay. I do like the Aqua B paper better. But I really wanted to see what the paints would perform like on 100% cotton. So I don't always have the best paintings in the world, guys. I tell you guys that all the time. I love sharing when my stuff don't turn out right, and show you how I keep on pushing in order to just keep painting and grow anyway. So I took a quarter piece of Arches 100% cotton, 140-pound cold press watercolor paper, which we all know Arches has the reputation for being the best watercolor paper on the market, especially in the American market. And I initially started to do a landscape with the paints, but the colors are not meant for that. There are not a lot of earth tones. These are pastels. So it's really hard to really mix clean browns. There aren't any like yellow ochres or burnt siennas or burnt umbers or anything like that. The darkest colors, as you can see in the set, are the dupes of the Daniel Smith, and that is a royal purple, a shadow violet, and a moonlight purple. So they're all versions of purple or violet, just maybe with black added in. This one is this shadow violet here is a mixture of PB29 and PG18, so pigment blue 29 and pigment green 18. The moonlight purple is a mixture of PB73, PB29, and PB73, PB29, and PG18. So no earth tones, no earth pigments, no mineral pigments, nothing of that nature. So after getting so far with this, although I did like the way my little house turned out, I will say that. And as you can see, the paints reacted really well with salt. They did really nicely with salt, so that was a good test for the salt. I mean, it wasn't turning out too bad. The sky had some really soft, sweet colors in it. But I just got to the point where I was like, I don't want to keep doing this. I want to do something a little bit more fun. So I switched, flipped the paper over and decided to do candy. I don't know. I've gone to the dentist lately. I've had a sweet tooth. I haven't been able to eat candy the way I want to because I do love it. So, hey, I decided to paint. So the first thing I painted was this lollipop here, this rainbow lollipop. And all of these were enhanced with fine line markers. So I have some Master's Touch fine line water soluble pens, fine liner pens. That I use sometime for accent. And I did pull those up because Inktober is about to start. And I'm going to be using those in some of the Inktober sketches that I do. So in this matter, this is what the paints are made for. You know, this turned out really well. They performed so much better on the 100% cotton Arches paper than they did on the cellulose paper, although I do not think that the images on the cellulose papers turned out bad at all. But the colors are definitely brighter and more vibrant on 100% cotton. They control better. Like I said, these paints have a lot of flow, so if you don't like that, if you like paints that stay still and don't move, these are not the paints for you. They are not. They really, really aren't. So after I did this one, which I was able to get a really nice shadow color here. It's more purple based, but it's still a really nice shadow color. I decided to do the peppermint candy here, and do it inside packaging. They mixed really well with the fine line markers. Those fine line markers are used to accent the shadow color there. So they worked well here with colored pencils. They worked well here with fine line markers. So that goes to show that other than being pretty paints themselves, they do work well with other media. And here finally I just did a circle peppermint, rainbow peppermint. I don't know, I like drawing candy. And I was just really playing around to test the paints. I really wanted to see how they perform on the arches. So hands down, the paints are beautiful. They definitely perform better on 100% cotton paper. They don't perform bad on the cellulose paper. They are not meant for, like, I don't think like a landscape artist, but a flower artist or a food artist, like people who do cards, scrapbooking. I think these are going to be absolutely amazing for crafters, you know, hands down. So I want to make sure, I'm just going to take a look at my notes here, and I want to make sure that I covered everything that I wanted to about these paints. So getting down to the nitty gritty of it, I would have to say I do believe that these are professional paint. If for no other reason than the flow, that in itself had me, but just the quality of the paints. I'm glad I was able to find the pigment information on it, because that's going to help with the light fastness determination. Probably not paints that I would use in a commissioned, anything commissioned. Definitely sketchbook work, fun work, like I said, cards, scrapbooks, things of that nature. Some of the pigments are pretty solid though. Everything does have white mixed in, and everything is more than a one pigment mixture, so that's something to think about. I do believe that they are professional Paul Rubens paints that are probably only sold on the Asian market. With all of that said, I like them. They're not something I'm going to use every day by any means, but I do think they will be fun to pull out every now and then to sort of do mixed media work with. They'll be really nice to pair with other paints for some different pastel opaque colors I may be looking for to pull off a composition. I'm definitely going to use them in some card making. As a matter of fact, I'm going to have a card making video coming up in the next week or so, maybe 2 weeks or so. And I'll probably be using these as one of the products to create those cards. So yeah, let's talk about price. So I found the paints on AliExpress for $14.88 for all 24 colors. And as I told you earlier, you can get it in the yellow tin like I have. You can get the pink tin, the purple tin, or the blue tin. And these are just the color tins that the seller on AliExpress has chosen to use to break those two paints down into and resell. That is free shipping. I will be sure to link AliExpress in the description. And I also link eBay. I also found them on Etsy. The seller on Etsy is selling the exact same set with the exact same colors for $27.99. Now that's definitely higher than the AliExpress set, but I am going to also include the Etsy site just in case you are interested in getting the paints and you trust getting them from Etsy a little bit more than you do from AliExpress. But mine was sent to me as a gift from a viewer via AliExpress, and I have absolutely no qualms with them. Yeah, I do. I like the paints. I would definitely recommend the paints as a little novelty thing. Now, here's the thing. If you have a whole bunch of paints and you don't think you're going to really be using pastel colors, then of course, I'll say, you know, spare yourself 15 bucks from AliExpress or almost 30 bucks from Etsy. If you decide to get it from them, that's 15 to 30 bucks, which is $15 more than AliExpress, actually, that you could use on getting another paint, something that'll be, or another pencil, something that's going to be more useful added to your art supplies. But if you have the money to splurge and you really want to, I don't think you would be disappointed in these, again, especially for card making, especially for flower artists. If you like doing food and things that require really bright pastel colors, then you're gonna really love this. Any and everybody, beginners to experts, will love this paint. I do believe it's professional, so that's why the quality is so good, and that's why it performs the way that it does. The most loving quality of them to me is the flow. That's why I love them. They are amazing. They really remind me of Core, the way they flow, although I'm pretty sure that they have different type of binders. If I'm not mistaken, Core is probably the only paint that use the particular binder that's in it, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, there you have it, guys. There is my little, hopefully quick review or shorter review than normal of the Paul Rubens Candy Color 24 color set that I received via AliExpress from a wonderful viewer. So if you found anything in this video helpful or information that will lead to you making a decision about these paints, please don't forget to give the video a thumbs up. Share the video. Maybe somebody you know could use the information in it to help them on their art journey. Use the comment section. Let me know if any of you guys have used these. Let me know, what do you think about, you know, AliExpress and the question of the products from AliExpress being authentic, although I believe these are. And I would really, I'm going to keep digging, guys. And I may do an update when I find the information. But I want a picture of the original Paul Rubens set that all of these sets are being poured from. Don't forget to follow and like on the Thrifty Apprentice Facebook page as well as Instagram page. We are going to have another giveaway coming up sooner or later, so be sure to subscribe and hit the bell so that you'll know when things of that nature are coming. And as I tell you at the end of every single video, just keep painting.